Howdy, everyone, and welcome to the Simplify Your Financial Life show and podcast. I'm Adam Lawrence, and I'm joined by a very special guest today, our very own Marie Villard. Welcome, Marie.
Hey Adam, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Today, I thought we could do a day in the life of you and also talk a little bit about AI and cybersecurity. So, to start us off, could you talk a little bit about how you got into the wealth management industry in the first place and how you ended up in your current role today?
Yeah, sure thing. So I never had any intentions of going into wealth management when I was younger. I thought for sure I would be on Broadway or I'd be a professional musician by now. And life took its, turns and twists, and here I am. And I wouldn't change it for anything. I really love this industry. But when I was in college, I realized I wasn't really cut out for the every day, all day practice schedule that a lot of these musicians followed, and really thought hard about what I was interested in. I took a few exploratory courses, one in finance, one in sociology, and one in psychology. And I really loved sociology, but and psychology, but I also loved finance. I loved math and I loved the numbers. And I thought to myself, well, I don't have to just be in an analytical role. Like I could probably use some of these other soft skills from sociology, psychology, and kind of bring them into the fold with the knowledge that I have. And so, I kind of thought about that and I kept taking courses and finally realized like I really want to be in financial services industry, because it kind of combines both those soft and hard skills. So I, out of college, went to work for a mutual fund company, and I got a job in kind of this rotating associates program and landed on kind of doing more of like the back end stuff where I was learning how to actually code in financial trading platforms and run queries. And I was supporting, this big piece of technology that banks in the UK and the US were using. And so I learned a lot about the industry from the back end, and then went to the UK, and that was a fun, and worked there for a little while. And that was really fun. But I realized that out of that trip, realized that I really like client facing and I didn't really like so much sitting behind the scenes. And so I thought, well, where could I kind of use the skills that I've gathered and also talk to people and help them learn? And so I got a job at Schwab doing just that. And Schwab really gave me a lot of knowledge about the financial services industry, but also about the RIA industry. And Schwab was where I met a handful of firms in Texas, including Financial Synergies, and they were my client for a good 2 to 3 years before they asked me to come aboard in 2013. And it was just me and my dog, and I was like, sure, why not? Let's go to Texas. So that's kind of how we got here. And then, I got here and I married a Texan, and I've been helping the firm grow, and it's been really fun. So I'm happy to be here.
That's awesome. I actually didn't know that you initially started off working with, trading platforms and really coding. I feel like that was back in the day when coding was still a relatively new thing. Is that right?
Oh yeah, I was working in SQL, which was one of like the basic languages in the coding world. It's also very easy to learn. Coming from a background of like no coding, it was kind of easy for me to like pick it up and understand it. But yeah, it was a lot of database work, which it is cool, and just not for people who actually like to interface with human beings on a day-to-day basis.
I see. Well, that's awesome that you're able to take that knowledge, and especially you were living in another part of the country. You grew up in New England and then coming down to Texas. So I'm sure don't miss the winters, but you also don't like the summers here. So it's kind of like you have to toe that line.
Yeah, I would say like I would trade a hot summer over those awful winters for sure. So,
I've always wondered the same thing because I feel like you can actually go outside in the summer here at least a little bit, but I feel like whenever you have a huge blizzard up in Boston or up in New York City, you can't even leave your house. They have to sometimes shut down, the entire city for a day. So that I totally get that.
yeah.
Um, But with that being said, I mean, when you talk about your current role here today, what does your typical day typically look like?
Yeah, that's kind of a hard question to answer because I don't know what it's going to look like every day because every day is different. And it's been like that since I started, which is and fun. I'm a person who I like a good challenge. I like surprises. I feel like there's always a problem to be solved, and there's always a solution to be made. And so I kind of approach each day that way. Um, I think where I started, even though I've kind of had this director of operations role and title since day one of being here, it looks very different from 10 years ago than it does now. Now I have a whole team of people behind me, and they really help with the day-to-day interaction with the clients and all of that. And now I can kind of focus more on the solutioning side of it. So when we're met with a problem, why number one, why was it a problem, or what was the issue that we need to solve, and how can we prevent it from happening again? And if it's something that we can do on our end to do that, we need to do it quickly and we need to do it thoroughly. So I like to spend most of my time kind of thinking through those things and then designing procedures, workflows to kind of fill those gaps. I also wear the CCO hat. So from time to time, I'll put on my compliance hat and I'll have to solve a compliance problem or do a filing or make sure that our filings are up to date. And then I also wear the chief technology officer hat. So when we have technology that we need to evaluate or we need to change, I'm kind of on the front lines of helping with that. But I did hire an IT company this year, so I don't have to do as much of the hardware and software troubleshooting. So, things are changing, but I think, we're just trying to make sure that we are as fluid as we can be for our clients, because if we experience fluidity on the back end, then they're going to have such a great client experience. So, and that's really kind of what drives me every day.
Absolutely. I love that. Yeah, I mean, you definitely wear a lot of hats. Those are three very big and important hats. So, I mean, I'm just lucky that I was able to get this time to interview you because I feel like you're always so busy and always doing so many different things. So that makes a lot of sense. But, in terms of the fact, you do wear the CTO hat, and so technology is a big part of what you do. Something that's been top of mind for not just people in the tech space, but for really the broader public and really the world in general the last year is AI. And so I kind of wanted to turn our attention to that and sort of ask you, what potential do you think it has to transform the wealth management industry as we know it today?
Yeah, so it's interesting because, AI is not a new concept. I think we hear a lot about it in the media because generative AI has become such a hot topic, especially with the introduction of ChatGPT, and how people are using it in day to day and then also in businesses. Um, and I think generative AI is important for us to understand and know how to use. And I think there are some things that it eventually will aid us in doing. But I kind of want to go back to the idea that AI is not anything new. The original intent of artificial intelligence was to make sure that it was to build technology that could generate knowledge and problem solve similar to the logic and the steps that we follow when we're actually trying to do that as humans. And so, I think that the intentions of this were to supplement and aid the general human condition of problem solving and creating, which is really cool. And it's with everything that's good, there's always something that there's always like a bad side to it, right? And I think that we've seen some of those things lately in the media, especially around what was going on in Hollywood with the strike, and then also with the potential for this to be used by bad actors in terms of phishing or voice phishing, which is called vishing. Um, you know, it, it's something that we're going to have to wrap our heads around, and really, as an industry, try to come to some sort of, I don't know if it's regulation or if it's you know best practices, but really make sure that we're using it in the right ways. I think it's funny. I think about when the term robo advisor was introduced, and about 10 years ago, I would say, and it was basically like, this is going to take over every financial advisor. It's going to totally torpedo them. This is the biggest threat to this industry. And there was a lot of fear around that. And what have we seen? We've seen that a robo advisor cannot replace an advisor because it is not smart enough to understand the human condition and all of the things that go along with really well thought out financial planning, and really well thought out financial advice. And so what we see is this technology that can automate and can generate portfolios and recommendations on behalf of the client's risk tolerance, which is such a basic component of a good financial plan and a good portfolio. It can do that well, but it can't do all the other things that we're here to do, that we're here to accomplish for our clients. And so I think, that being said, that could be a piece of the pie for an overall financial advisory firm to use and lean on the technology to help them, but is it going to replace us? No. And so the way that I see the evolution of this in our industry is really creating these use cases and these opportunities for us to get better at what we're currently doing. So like ChatGPT, we can go in and we can ask it to go through the IRS tax code and help us pull out pieces, or which section of the code is this law in, or or what does this regulation actually mean? Can you boil it down? I can see things like that helping us, or getting really clear on certain things that are really abstract and trying to get down to like a nitty gritty type of solution. I could see it helping us write better notes to our clients. I could see it help us, take notes in a Zoom meeting, for us, so that we're not having to type away while we're trying to listen to a client and be actively listening. So there are some really good things that can come out of it. That being said, there are some really scary things that can happen. And I think that those hopefully will become easier to identify with the use of AI and with the use of technology. With AI built in, it'll be smart enough to notice the people who are using it and who aren't. That's my goal for that. Hopefully there's someone out there who's building that right now.
I love that. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Kind of going back to what you said before, that this concept of AI is not a new thing. I think a lot of people, especially broader society, thought, man, 2023, that's when all this AI stuff really started. And it actually has been 30, 40, even 50 years in the works. I mean, and we always think about a lot of the technologies that are, that we use in our day-to-day and that help not only people in the business world, but families and kids with all kinds of their homework and whatnot. They were started by DARPA. They were started by essentially the Advanced Research Institute of the military, and that's where we get all of these different AI and technology products. But kind of like the I guess soft AI, the AI that we don't really think about. I mean, it's been in our smartphones literally since 2008, or even before, whenever the iPhone first came out. If you search on your Photos app, I know for sure the iPhone has this, and I believe Samsung does as well. You can search you can say dog, and then it'll bring up pictures of all the dogs in your camera roll. That is an AI type of program that is doing that. And so I think it's already embedded in our lives, and it's just going to become that much more embedded. And that's what people are thinking about when they see ChatGPT, or when they see Microsoft Copilot being implemented into Microsoft Office and all those types of things. But I totally agree with you about the financial planning side of things, that a lot of people are worried. I think both advisors and clients alike, that it's going to potentially replace us, or take our place in a way. And I think that a lot of the concern, it's not that it's not a good concern, but I feel like a lot of it is maybe overhyped in the media a lot. So one of the things I think about is it's very complex, and there are a lot of moving parts in a total wealth management approach for, let's say, a specific client. So you have the financial plan side of things, you have the investment management side of things, but then you have all these other bits and pieces that kind of surround those two halves of the circle. So you've got estate planning, you've got tax planning, you've got insurance, all those types of things that, can change as life changes, and an AI program can't look at let's say a base financial plan, starting off the relationship with the client and say, well, you want to have a baby in, let's say, 5 years. How does that change the fact, that you don't have any insurance right now? How does that change your tax situation? How does that change your estate planning situation? I feel like you said, the AI can do basic math, but it really can't evaluate that from a more kind of complex perspective of all these different moving parts. But honestly, at the end of the day, with all that being said, our industry will always be a relationship-based industry at the end of the day. And unless and until an AI can provide that same rapport, that same trust and level of, trust and confidence, that, I feel that I hope that we offer to clients, I don't really see it taking our place anytime soon. We'll see what exactly Elon Musk's Tesla bot has to offer. He wants to have this, like, a humanoid robot essentially that can stand up and walk around just like you or I could, and have that do things. But I don't think it's going to be coming towards our industry anytime soon.
Well, it's funny. So you mentioned, AI being embedded in your phones. Yeah, you think about, okay, Siri, ask Google, Alexa, like that's all AI as well. And that's using predictive technology to anticipate your questions and answer your questions. When was that introduced? Over 15 years ago. Has that become so mainstream that everyone is absolutely dependent on it? I saw an article on Friday that was basically like, singularity in AI, which singularity is like the hypothetical future point in time when like a technology takes over. They were saying it's going to happen in 2031. And I'm like, how can you just decide that? Like, I think about happened if the robo advisor didn't take over the financial advisor in 10 years, then how is that going to happen in less time than that? And so I see these headlines, and it's pretty funny to me. It's funny to me that the Elon Musk robot, like, who's going to be interested in that? Maybe him, sure, but is it going to be a mainstream thing where everyone has like this humanoid robot in their homes? No, I mean, I think even robot vacuums are still not mainstream, right? And the access and the cost of the technology is not, it's not basic. And so it's going to go a little bit slower. And all of this too depends on, the economy and the markets and all of that. So it'll be fun to watch and curious to see. But I do think the more serious side of things is that industries are going to have to find ways to regulate this if the government's not going to regulate it. And there are pros and cons to the government regulating information. We saw that with the introduction of the World Wide Web, like back in the day. And so I don't think that is the way to go, but I do think that it is important for industries to understand how they're going to use it and how they're going to identify use cases for it and ways that they can build restrictions and other types of regulation around it. And I think, Hollywood was one of the first, kind of industries to really take a stab at it, at the first steps of that anyway.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And, I'm not sure if you're a fan of Arnold Schwarzenegger and all the Terminator movies, but going back to your point about the singularity, people are worried about Skynet. And I just, I don't see that being a reality anytime soon. There have been actually a lot of meetings, on Capitol Hill, especially with business leaders and stuff like that. Elon Musk and those kinds of guys of the world, the leader of Google, Sundar Pichai, Satya Nadella, leader of Microsoft, all getting together in a closed door meeting on Capitol Hill and talking about, how can we bring the regulation of AI to the forefront so that it does what we want it to do. So I think your point is well taken, but I don't think we're anywhere near that yet. And so one thing I do want to say, though, it's kind of interesting because a lot of times people think, of course, about the downsides, but I also think AI can be kind of fun too. And so one of the things I think about, I'm a huge fan of impressions. And so I was watching a video the other day, and it was Bill Hader on Conan O'Brien. And of course, for those that aren't familiar with Bill Hader, excellent former SNL cast member, great impressionist, and a great actor at that. And he was doing an impression of Al Pacino. And it was a specific scenario where Al Pacino was at the Emmys. And this actually happened. And he was like looking around and asking about the lights. And of course, we know how Al Pacino is. But what this specific video had done is they transposed the face of Al Pacino onto Bill Hader as he was doing the impression on the show. And it was honestly pretty uncanny and a little bit uncomfortable seeing that sort of combined, Hader Pacino person that doesn't exist. And it was a deep fake, and it actually said that on the video. And so, that's a kind of a buzzword that's been thrown around a lot lately. People have been worried about deep fakes. There were actually fake pictures of world leaders that came out. They were deep fakes of them, doing things or saying things that hadn't, actually happened. And
like
so
the Pope in Balenciaga,
the Pope in Balenciaga and wearing a very nice chain apparently. So that's an interesting thing, but also a concern for some people that could be used for bad actors to make people look like they're doing or saying things that they aren't. And so I do want to ask you about kind of the risks of cybersecurity and AI, and what risks should we be aware of? I know you mentioned vishing and some of the other risks that you talked about earlier.
Yeah, so I mean, it's funny because you and I right now are going to put our likeness out on the internet in video form and in audio form by recording this podcast. And anyone in the public domain will be able to access it. ChatGPT will be able to scrub it in their next update if they so choose. And so, there is nothing that you put out on the internet anymore unless you have controls in place, lockdown, that is safe from other people using it. And that's just the world that we live in. So what does that mean for the average person? Ways to protect yourself on the internet, there are a lot of ways, but I think about mostly the things that people are doing on social media first and foremost. And there are a lot of people who are not aware that their profiles on even Venmo, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok are public, and anyone can access them. They can see what you're spending your money on, who you're spending it with. In Venmo, they can, or PayPal, if you don't have the settings correct, you can, see what your interests are on Facebook, who you're following on Instagram. And so there are things that users and people can do to kind of, tamper that down. The worst that I always cringe when I see people share those long lists of things on Facebook where it's like, where did you meet your spouse? Like, what is your favorite color? And they're all questions that, are two-factor authentication questions or multi-factor authentication questions. And, if your profile is public, people can go and get that information and try to hack you because you maybe have two-factor or multi-factor set up, but you know what? They have a really good sample size of questions that you may have asked and answered in your two-factor authentication. So if we can, as a collective, help train people to do better with those types of things, then I think we can, better position ourselves to not be victimized by these people. The thing with the vishing and like the deep fake imagery in terms of video and voice, there are ways to kind of help combat that. So, if you have a family member, when they get phone calls on their hard phone lines, older family members, and they're being asked questions, remind them that they don't owe it to anyone to answer those questions. And if they weren't expecting a call, don't take it. In fact, if you answer it and you weren't expecting it, then politely hang up. And, it's okay to do that. The last thing I would hate for anyone to do is to give, anything about their voice away. Your voice is like a fingerprint, and I think about, those companies that call you in there and you're like, hello, hello. And then, you're like, I don't know, Bob. I don't know who this is. Nobody's answering. They're recording you. They're trying to get your likeness and your video and your voice. And so if you get something like that and there's no one on the line, or it sounds like somebody who is not native to your area, then I would just hang up. And then if you want to call it back after you've put the phone number in Google and you see that it was actually your vet calling, or a doctor that you are anticipating, that's fine too. I think too, it's if you get someone like Adam, if you called me and you were like, hey Marie, I'm in a bind and I need you to go buy me this, or I need you to give me your credit card number or your bank account information, I would say, okay, Adam, sure thing, and hang up. And then I would call you back directly and make sure that it wasn't you calling, or that it was you. And I think a lot of us have smartphones now who that will tell us the number, and that will try a best estimate of like where the phone number is coming from or who it's coming from. And so that's kind of a nice thing. So, if you don't have something like that, you can ask your phone company to turn on, predictive caller ID, which uses AI to, take information, try to predict who's calling. But there are some basic things. I used to say trust yet verify. And now there's no trust. You just verify. And so anytime anything comes at you, you have to be on guard and you have to try to verify the information as best as you can. And oftentimes that is against human nature. Human nature, we all want to help each other. We all want to, provide and make sure that we're connected and all of those things. But I think we have to be super diligent in this era.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And also, it's interesting that you talk about, using someone's voice. So there was a really interesting investigative report that was done in the Wall Street Journal a few months ago. And this reporter, what she did is she recorded herself. I think it only took like maybe 5-10 minutes to do so. And then she used a free online AI audio website to be able to make her voice say whatever she wanted it to say. And going back to your point about your voice as your fingerprint, she wanted to see how far she could get with this, just in this article. And so she actually called up her bank, and for this particular bank where she has her checking and savings account at, you get through the initial prompts through your voice. It's not just you answering specific questions, but also just about the actual sound of your voice itself. And so she used this program, and she called the bank. She had it on speakerphone, and she was typing into this program everything that the prompt was asking her, and she got through it. And so that all it takes is a few seconds, less than 10 seconds. So the thing that I've been doing is now if I get calls from numbers that I don't know, I don't answer it. People can always leave a voicemail, and honestly, oftentimes if they don't leave a voicemail, it's probably not legitimate. In either a professional or even in a personal situation, like with a friend or a family member, if it's that urgent, they're going to leave you a voicemail or send you a text, and you can always get back to them. So that's a thing I think about. But also in this article, what was interesting is even though she got through to her bank, she then used it on her family members. So I think her sister was calling her up and telling her that her goldfish had passed away, which is sad for anybody. But she was answering the call with this AI thing and was having it say everything. Also, her dad called her to just check up on her, see how she was doing, and they said, "Hey, it sounded like you, but it didn't take any breaths, and the cadence was really weird, and I could just tell that it wasn't you, that it was probably a program." So there are things that you can watch for, but it's getting harder, and that's why I say just don't let it happen. Just don't answer the phone. When it comes to seeing fake images online, they always say the hands. They say that deep fakes are really bad at doing hands. And so if the hand is like stretched, or if the fingers look kind of like ET, the extraterrestrial, then it's probably a fake photo, and you shouldn't believe whatever the message is. So I totally agree with you on that. Now, the thing is that AI, it sounds like AI in this case is being used to make existing scam techniques more sophisticated. But could it also be used to create new scam techniques that we've never seen before?
Yeah, but I think simultaneously what's happening is that there are things that are innate to an email like spam filtering that are building AI into their filtration so that they can actually see and understand patterns in generated content, and try to capture those types of messages or use keywords that they see over and over again in these scams. And so, I think while things are getting more heated in terms of, people's availability to kind of scam others, these technologies are building traps for that. And so what we're going to just see is just this kind of constant battle. And it does require a level of human interaction, in my opinion. We can't just rely on the technology to capture these. So for things like, making these, like you were saying, she wasn't taking breaths. She didn't sound like a normal person. It just sounded like it was just kind of repeat, answered and asked. And I read that article as well, and I've listened to some of the examples of people regenerating their voices through AI. I think that we will over time we will get used to hearing what that sounds like as people are reporting on it, as things happen. You already know, like when you get those robocalls, like that you're hearing a recorded voice, like you'll be able to detect some anomalies, but it will get more sophisticated. It has gotten more sophisticated. It used to be that you could identify like the 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 scammers that were from different parts of the world because of the way of their usage of English in writing. And now they're using AI to generate content that sounds more like it's you and I having a conversation. But I think what we do that AI doesn't do is that we know our clients and we know their behaviors, and we get to learn the ins and outs of who they are and the things that they might ask from us. And so if we see something that's off color or out of that characteristic, then we can capture it. We also have the cybersecurity tools built into our email and our other programs to make sure that in the interim, if something crazy happens, it's captured or quarantined, or it alerts us that it is something that could potentially be a bad actor. And that's, I think, what we're going to just have to do is we just have to prepare that it's going to happen. And how do we prepare for that? Well, we have, cybersecurity insurance, which is a new kind of program in the last couple of years that insurance companies are offering other companies to purchase. And what does it cover? It covers things like the bad actors. Like if something were to slip through our internal protocol and our technology that we have in place, and we were to do something that with the client and it wasn't actually the client, it would cover them, and make them whole. But I think the first place to start is to train your people and to train your clients as to what to expect. And then, you build in the technology and make sure it's understood that this is going to happen, but we have to be very diligent as well as use the technology and the insurance.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And something like a tool that's out there now, ChatGPT, that we can use for some of those use cases that you talk about. I mean, how should we as advisors and also our clients be thinking about how they could use ChatGPT in their everyday lives? And what should they ask it for advice about? I mean, should they just ask it anything, or should they use it for specific reasons?
Yeah, so I mean, it's so funny because it has some information. I would say it doesn't have all information yet. I mean, what program could have all information? And I think every update we see, it has scrubbed more and more of the internet. But for an example, I asked ChatGPT before our call, who is Marie Villard? And it couldn't give me an answer because it doesn't know yet. And, so it maybe hasn't crawled our website yet, or LinkedIn. But, I thought that was funny. But, I think asking it things that you need to either help you be better, like you're writing a letter to your parents, and it's a heartwarming, thoughtfelt letter, or you want it to write, help you with a lyric because you're writing a song and you just can't thesaurus enough words to get one that works for you. Or you are trying to read through a lot of material to get to a very specific answer, and you can't do it, or you don't have the time, and it can help you do those types of things. I think those are really good use cases for it. One of the things I wouldn't do is like put your own information in there, because then it's your own information.
Yep.
And it's out there in the public domain now. So what I mean by that, like, don't tell it your birthday, don't tell it any information about you. Like, I asked it who Marie Villard was, and I wasn't going to tell it who Marie Villard was, right? And if I'm working on a policy here, I'm not going to say, hey, write this policy very simply for me, because if I do that, then it's going to have our internal policies out there, and maybe that's confidential information. So I wouldn't ask it confidential information or anything that you deem personally identifiable information, also called PII, and you might see that term. But personally identifiable information is basically anything about you or someone you know that would identify you. So your name, your address, your locale, what time zone you're in. I don't know, anything detailed about you that you just really don't want the general public to know, or these bad actors. I would use it for fun things. You can have fun with it. Like, write me a love poem to this girl I'm dating, or, write me, write me a really good response to this email that I received, and I don't know how to respond to it, or I want to do something special for someone, and this can help me get there. That's the type of stuff I would use it for. And for work, like I said, as long as you're not putting your company policies in it, or any personally identifiable information, or NPI, which is non-public information, then I think you're good.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense, because there are a lot of potential situations where you could use it, and you just have to think about what are the implications. So, an example, you talk about don't put any PII in there. I was talking to a colleague at a CPA conference a few weeks ago, and he runs a technology consulting company. And one of the companies that he consults for is an engineering design firm based here out of Houston. And one of the engineering employees had huge amounts of engineering schematic documents, like more than 50 or 60 pages. And he wanted to distill them down into a more concise format, and also to generate a summary. And so he copy and pasted it into ChatGPT. And then, Monday rolls around, and his boss finds out about it and is absolutely furious. And so what ends up coming out about it is that this document had extremely sensitive, confidential information, private information about intellectual property that the company was working on, and also private patent information for potential patents that the company hadn't even filed yet. And so now all that is out blasted in the public domain. And one particular scenario comes to mind with the recent class action lawsuit by the Authors Guild. So a bunch of authors, some really famous ones like George R.R. Martin, who wrote Game of Thrones, they got together and filed a class action lawsuit against OpenAI, who is the creator of ChatGPT. And they said, hey, you have committed copyright infringement on an industrial scale, because you have essentially ingested all of our books to help train your program. And we didn't agree to that. You didn't pay us royalties. You didn't pay us any sort of fee. You didn't ask us, nothing. And so this is a really difficult situation to think about, because, on the one hand, we want programs like ChatGPT around because it can benefit our lives in potentially hugely valuable ways. Like I actually have one of my friends who wrote his now girlfriend a poem using ChatGPT, and he claims that's why they're together now. So and he got really specific with it about who they are, and who he is and who she is, their different interests, and then had the program write a poem, and apparently it turned out really well. So good for him. But it can also be, scary for people that their livelihood is based off of the creative content that they generate, aka authors, aka musicians. So with this Authors Guild class action lawsuit, people were like, well, it's just scrubbing the Wikipedia page, or it's just scrubbing, the Cliff Notes website on there. And so that wouldn't be copyright infringement because that's just, public information in the public domain that's out there. But then certain authors started thinking to themselves, okay, is this really true? So what they did is they had themselves and their lawyers prompt ChatGPT to see if they could get specific information. So one of the authors in the lawsuit, he wrote a book about this biologist basically going through the Amazon rainforest on a quest to find specific animals in his study. And the way that the author describes the character, it's very specific. He talks about his blonde hair, talked about his appearance, talked about his demeanor and his personality. And this is information that you can only find in the actual novel, not actually in the Wikipedia article, not in the Cliff Notes. And they tricked the program into giving verbatim text from ChatGPT. And so it's sort of like a gotcha moment. And so it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out, because the other one that I think about is there was a huge lawsuit against Google in the early 2010s, because Google essentially did the same thing, but for books. So they essentially went around through literally thousands of libraries throughout the United States, and I think around the world, and basically did deals with them and said, hey, all these books that you have, both, that are out, that are being, checked out, that are popular books, and also the ones sitting in the basement gathering dust, can we please scan those in and put them all on the internet? And the libraries agreed to it, but they never asked any of the authors.
Yeah.
And so, that's a very difficult situation, because they asked the repository of books, but not the people that created them. And so what ended up happening is these authors ended up suing, and Google was actually super happy about this. And you may ask why. It's like, why is Google happy that they're happy about all these authors suing them? And the reason is because now all these authors, for maybe independent books that they couldn't find, or smaller time books that aren't on everyone's radar, that they can't go out and actually do a licensing deal with, they were actually able to come to the forefront, and they were able to pay them in a settlement. And Spotify also did a similar thing when they decided to put all of the songs in the world online. So it'll be very interesting to see how this plays out. But kind of what you mentioned before, it's interesting because not just, like I also saw an interesting interview with will.i.am. He was at the Davos Economic Forum a few months ago with a lot of other world leaders, and they're afraid that it's going to replace musicians, which of course is another big creative art out there in pop culture that we all know and love. And he said it's not going to replace us. It's actually going to amplify our work, because and make us better as musicians, because the producer that I had to go in the studio 10 hours before recording and bounce all of my ideas off of, now I can just use ChatGPT for that. And I find that kind of in a similar regard, because certain ideas that I have about whether it's not PII, but maybe just in general something I'm working on, or right now I'm studying, of course, for the CFP exam, and being able to ask it questions is really helpful, because it gives you a lot more specific information than Google does. I feel like whenever you ask Google a question, you have to go in and you have to read an entire article and get maybe to the bottom of the article to find the one answer you were looking for. But now ChatGPT can just give it to you straight up. And so I feel like that's a really cool use case for it.
Yeah, I think there's some really good things, like I said, that can come out of it. I definitely agree with will.i.am. Like, it's not going to replace financial advisors or musicians. It's going to enhance what we do. And I think about how we can be better at personalizing things for our clients, our outreach to them, even the things that we're creating, like a lot of the blog articles that we write, we create those ourselves. We are creating this podcast, and, we create marketing materials, so articles and newsletters, and we can use technology that has AI features built in to help us create better content, more concise content, more direct content for those people who are consuming it. And we can find out trends, and we can find out what people like and what they don't like a little bit easier with this technology. So yeah, it's going to make us better at what we do. It's definitely not going to replace us, though.
Yeah, I don't think so. You're exactly right. So, with all that being said, with, all the potential use cases for AI and all the exciting things, but also some of the potential risks that we have to watch out for, would you say that inventions like AI in particular are overall beneficial for society, or are they more harmful?
I think the thing is anything that comes at us is eventually going to better us. We just have to figure out how we're going to use it and how we're going to put boundaries and limits on it. And that's with anything. I think we've seen this over time in different industries. I think about like the packaged food industry and like how that has all had to change and be regulated in a different way with actual, you know, calorie content, saturated fat, unsaturated fat, like all the different things that you see on a nutrition facts label, like the novelty of something new like that and us having to figure out how to regulate it it's gonna be similar. There are gonna be similar behaviors. Like we're gonna take it to a certain extent and then we're gonna have to scale back and then we're gonna keep going and we have to scale back. That's with anything that's new in any industry or anything that's introduced. So is it a good thing? Yeah, I think the intention of artificial intelligence was good. I think scientists came out with the intention to better humanity, to help us be more efficient, to help us get better at what we're doing and how we're existing. And, I think about 3D printing, how cool that is that people are printing homes for people who are homeless. And there's just so many cool things that can come out of it that aren't necessarily going to replace what we're doing, but enhance what we're doing. So yeah, I really do think that there's a lot of good that can come out of this. We just have to be ninjas and combat those bad actors and make sure that we are, building our own kind of protections around the things that can be bad out of this technology.
No, I totally agree. And it kind of reminds me of what my dad always used to say, because, I like to eat healthy, but I'm also a fan of junk food. So, talking about the different saturated fats, it's like, hey, Adam, there's, good cholesterol and fats like in avocados, but I'm also a huge fan of Doritos. So I hope, when it comes down to the Chat GPT, that we stay more on the avocado side and stay away from the Dorito side, if you will.
I'm with you on that.
So, well, Marie, I really appreciate your time today. This has been a fascinating discussion, and I always really appreciate your perspective. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Adam.
You got it. Thanks, Marie.